After a week of hard planning, I'm ready to set the stage for the Game of Thrones rewrite. Welcome to the newest episode of SDW.
Super Dario World!
It's a me,
Dario!
Woohoo! Let's go!
I had a busy weekend, man. I spent most of it down in Mexico, hanging out with my friends and with my dogs. It was it was a pretty good time, and I got a little deeper into Red Dead Redemption 2, which just keeps getting better and better. So I'm pretty stoked. I had a really good time. I'm just exhausted. I'm so exhausted. I also went out and did Bombed at the Beach, which is always a lot of fun for me. It takes its toll, man. I wasn't smart about it this time. Usually I'm smart about it. This time I really wasn't. I didn't prepare the way I should. And but I got it done. That's all that matters, right? And tonight I'm looking forward to I'm going to go to the screening of Dark Phoenix, which is I don't know what to expect from this one. So far, X-Men movies have mostly been misses, so I don't know what to expect. I'm trying to be positive, but I'm very skeptical about it. But who knows? Who knows? I'll let you know what I thought about it. There's a press embargo until I think Wednesday, so I won't be able to tell you tomorrow. But I'll give you my thoughts on the quick spoiler-free thoughts on the movie on Wednesday. But I want to get into the Game of Thrones thing. But before I set the stage, let me just give you a quick reminder that the podcast is now officially on the iHeartRadio app, and it's a part of the show's podcast network, which means that you can find it in the iHeartRadio app. Just type in The Show Presents Super Dario World. You'll find it right there. Or you can find it in rock1053.com, our website. Just click on the podcast tab. You'll find it right there. And you can still find it on iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube. Just type in Super Dario World Podcast. I'll be right there. No changes this week so far, so I'm not even going to get into it this week. Everything's going to stay the same. But okay.
Winter is coming.
So where to begin? That's actually the two hardest parts of a story is where to begin and where to end, right? I've always said that. Beginning and the ending, hardest things. So far, Game of Thrones had an amazing beginning, but fucked up the ending, all right? They screwed up the landing. It sucked. It was horrible. We can all agree. I think book lovers, show lovers, whoever you want, we can all agree it sucked, right? Is that fair? I think that's fair. Based off of the responses and the questions I've gotten online, I'm going to assume that's fair, okay? So the question is, where did they go wrong? To me, there's so many storylines, and each one jumped the shark at various different spots. So there's no clear-cut way of doing this. There's no clean cut. So I'm going to have to, unfortunately, start from a spot that I'm not totally happy with. And that's going to be the final episodes of Season 6. And I'll set it up so that you know exactly what's happened with every storyline. The big issue here is I gave myself a rule. The rule is that I will not introduce any other characters that did not appear on the show. And as soon as I started thinking about that, I realized, fuck. That means that I can't do a lot of things that I wanted to do because, well, a lot of the characters that I need aren't there, or I can't introduce any more characters. So, unfortunately, I will have to follow D&D's path with a lot of storylines. And the issue that I've had with D&D, that's David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, the issue that I have with their storylines is that they killed a lot of them. They didn't know what to do with their stories, and since they kind of wanted to end the show, they started killing off storylines. For example, they killed Stannis' storyline because in the books, Stannis is still alive and kicking, man. He's still fighting. They killed off the Tyrell storyline, also still alive in the books. They have a plan. We just don't know what it is. Marjorie's storyline, they had a plan. The whole thing with the Sparrows, those are the religious people who took Cersei and whatever. The religious fanatics. They're still alive and kicking in the books, and they have a plan. And D.B. Weiss and David Benioff, D&D, were just like, you know what? Let's just completely erase the storyline. This whole thing that we've been working on and setting it up for years, let's just kind of delete it because we don't know what to do with it. Another storyline that they just killed was the Dorne storyline. Literally. I mean, Doran Martell got killed off. The Sand Snakes got killed off. Everybody, they were left tortured and all that stuff. And it didn't really make any sense. My issue with the way that was done is that it didn't really make any sense. So, the way that I figured this could work is the major characters, their story is going to start, well, I'm going to start them at the beginning of season 7, and I'll tell you exactly where each and every one was at that point. I will move around certain aspects of the secondary characters and then just take it from there. Because here's the big issue. Here's why I can't go further back. Because I know I'm going to lose you. I know the story's too big. It's too confusing. You're not seeing things. You're just hearing names. So I know that I'm going to lose a lot of you if I just, for example, I start going deeper into Stannis' story and all the lords. If I keep Sansa in the Vale and she has to interact with all the lords there and try to do the politics of the Vale to convince them to go to the north and all that stuff, I'm going to lose you because there's too many characters. I'm going to have to add a whole bunch of people. Some of them, they haven't been mentioned in years. And so I'll make it so that Sansa still ends up in Winterfell, but in a way that makes sense. Because the way that they did it, at least to me, made no fucking sense. And actually, I regret using Sansa as an example because that's the one where I really have to stretch it. Because why would Littlefinger give up Sansa to the Boltons? No fucking sense. There's no situation in which that makes any sense or that helps him in any way. But it doesn't matter. Okay, so I wanted to make that clear. Why I'm starting at the final episodes of Season 6, beginning of Season 7. So let me remind you, and I'm going to do it by regions, by the way. So you have the Winterfell storyline, you have the King's Landing storyline, and you have the Marine storyline, which is Daenerys. Okay? So let's start with the easiest one, the North. So the North, Season 6 ends with Jon Snow being crowned King of the North. All right? That's how it ends, which really doesn't make any sense. Because the reason why that doesn't really make any sense is because the Battle of the Bastards, technically, Jon had lost it. Okay? Jon went into that battle. He did exactly what he was not supposed to do, and they were losing until the Vale forces arrived. So technically, Littlefinger is the one that won that battle, and by association, Sansa. So it's a Sansa-Littlefinger victory, and it doesn't really make any sense why Jon got declared king, but he was, all right? And so the big mistake that I've always felt that D&D made with Jon's storyline is this. The moment that he came back to life, nobody really acted like it was that big of a deal. I mean, here in our world, we have a story of a guy that came back to life, and it's kind of a big deal. It's kind of a really, really big deal, you know? You may have heard of him, you know? Some might say that there was time before him and time now. We are living 2019 years after his birth, so you may have heard of him. Anyway, so they're both J's. Their names both start with J's. JJ's. Anyway, so the way that I would fix it, so the way that that season would end, or how I would start Jon's story as King in the North, first off, I would not make him King in the North, but this is what happened to Jon leading up to that point. So in the books, the theory is after Jon gets stabbed, we have no idea. We have no idea what happens to him. He might be dead. George R. R. Martin might keep him dead. But assuming that he has to come back, the way that everybody thinks that's going to happen, or the ongoing theory, is that in the books, Jon is a warg, which means that he can go into and control animals. So he sends his consciousness into his direwolf ghost. So that's why they're so connected, they're so bonded, because Jon, when he sleeps, he sometimes goes into ghost. So that's one of the issues of why Jon's kind of a loner and he tries to keep things secret, because most people don't like wargs in the Seven Kingdoms, and they think they're evil and they kill them. But the wildlings think they're kind of cool. Anyway, so Jon is a warg, which means that when he was getting stabbed, the ongoing theory is before his body died, his consciousness leapt into ghost. And then, so the way that Jon's going to come back is because Melisandre, the Red Priests, have this thing where they kind of, it's a magic thing, I guess, where they kind of burn your wounds and it heals. It's like a super advanced form of healing. They're healers, basically. And so if Melisandre heals Jon's body, then Jon's consciousness, which is in ghost, will be able to come back. And that's the ongoing theory, right? So it'll look like he resurrected, but he was never really dead. His consciousness just went into his wolf, which is what wargs can do. There's actually a chapter in the book from the perspective of a warg that just got killed, where he's pissed off because he got killed and now he's stuck in one of his animals. So that's kind of the way that everybody thinks Jon's story is going to go. So in the show, what I would have done is, because if you guys remember how Jon Snow came back to life, it was just Melisandre went there, gave him a haircut, kind of like put her hands over his body and left, or washed him and then just left. Like, not even closing the wounds, not even the kiss of life, not even nothing. She just did that and left, and Jon came back to life. It was really weird. The weirdest part of that, though, was that Davos kept begging her to do it. Davos, who hates magic, kept begging her to bring back Jon Snow. And at that point, they've met. He and Davos have met once, and the only thing that he knew about Jon is that his men killed him. So, and that he refused Stannis, his king. So the way that I would have handled that a little bit differently is Melisandre trying to bring Jon back, or trying to do something because she senses something with the wolf. But by that time, Wolf Jon would be out getting revenge. And so she's trying to get in there, and Davos is like, no, you crazy bitch, you've done enough. What happened to Stannis? Because for some reason, Davos cared more about Jon than Stannis, who was dying down in Winterfell. And so I would have done that differently. So eventually Melisandre finds a way to bring him back. And the issues between Davos and Melisandre would have kept growing because of Melisandre. She sacrificed Shireen, which is Stannis' daughter. Remember, they burned her alive. And so Melisandre would have been like, hey, well, I sacrificed her and it gave me the power to bring back Jon. And so Jon would not have killed her because technically he's alive because of her. So some BS like that. Melisandre's pretty tricky. But he still would have exiled her anyway. Or just send her away to just go somewhere else, or I'll kill you. So the big that would make sense. But the big change I would have done with Jon is that I would have made an actual personality change. My big fucking issue with Jon Snow is that after he got killed, he came back and he was just a little bit more broody. That's it. Dude, you died. You got killed by your closest allies. You should have been pissed or colder or just more paranoid. There should have been a change in Jon. So I would have made him more colder, more brutal, no more innocent kid trusting. It's like, no more BS. Either it's my way or the fucking highway, bitches. So I would have made him tougher that way. So I think that will make it more interesting. So let's continue down Jon Snow's story up to that point. So if you make him a little bit more colder, a little bit more brutal, a little bit more no BS, and everybody starts spreading the word that, dude, Jon Snow came back from the dead. So he starts to become kind of like a living legend amongst the people. And they're like, oh, dude, this dude came back from the dead. What? He came back from the dead? Dude, he came back from the dead. And so his legend kind of starts growing. And it's not just that he's the best claim or whatever. It's because he's becoming a godly figure, if that makes any sense. Plus, Melisandre kind of spreading the word would help, priests are really good at spreading the word of godly figures. Anyway, so I would give you the Battle of the Bastards in a way that made a little bit more sense. Like, the thing that I hated the most is that the Boltons stepped out of Winterfell to have a fight when they didn't have to. I hate that they don't know how to use castles in Game of Thrones. A castle is the greatest defense you'll have, and it's actually pretty funny because Jon Snow actually asked that question. His question was, why would the Boltons come out of Winterfell to fight us? And Davos' explanation was like, no, he doesn't want to look weak in front of his new generals and stuff like that. And that's just bonkers if you think about it. It's like, oh yeah, your new generals will think you're weak for making a smart military decision. That sounds about right. Yeah, sure, that's how that works. No, so how would you make the Boltons come out of Winterfell? The only way that kind of makes sense to me is if the Northern forces would have... Oh, by this point, Theon escaped, right? Theon escaped with Sansa. I'll get back to how Sansa got there in a minute. But Theon escapes with Sansa, and with the help of Brienne, they make it to Jon. And so, since Theon was in the Dreadfort, and if you remember, while Theon was in the Dreadfort, he was kind of given false hope, and they let him escape a few times through a secret passage. Well then, thanks to Theon, they find the secret entrance into the Dreadfort, and they take it from him. For those of you who don't remember, the Dreadfort is the Bolton Fortress. That's their castle. So Jon Snow and the Wildlings have taken over the Dreadfort, and the Boltons are in Winterfell. So both houses lost their respective historical seats, So they're kind of pissed. Also, Jon Snow could send a message to Winterfell saying, you know what? I have an army of wildlings. We're just going to start raiding all your lands. Umbers, I'm going to raid your lands. Manderleys, who are helping them. Everybody who's helping the Boltons, we're just going to go start raiding your lands because you can't stop us because you're all in Winterfell protecting the Boltons. And that's the reason why they would meet out in the field. That's the only reason why I could think they would ever actually step out and meet out on the field instead of just letting them come at me, bro. It's winter, okay? By the way, I would also not let them forget that it's wintertime. I hated that the Battle of the Bastards was, all sun. Well, not sunny, but there was no snow around. I hated that. But anyway, so the only reason why I could think that they would leave Winterfell is because of that. Because, okay, they took our castle. We'll meet in the middle and duke it out. Because fuck these guys, we have to take our castle back. Because that would actually make them look weak. They've lost their house's ancient seat. So, to recap Justin John's story, he comes back to life in a way that makes sense, gathers his northern army to go because people are starting to look at him as a Jesus Christ figure. He goes, takes the Dreadfort with the help of Theon, which, by the way, it would give us a scene between a cold, kind of like harsher Jon and Theon Greyjoy, which I think would be fantastic. It would be great. Sansa trying to defend Theon that he saved his life, and Jon pissed off and wanting to kill him. So I think that would be fantastic. It would make it heavier. Like Jon reluctantly accepts his help to take the Dreadfort, because that would be the big decision. Do I go on to Winterfell or do I trust Theon fucking Greyjoy? So I think that would be a little bit more fun, and Theon would stay a prisoner with the Starks because he did betray them. Anyway. So, and he takes the Dreadfort. They have the fight, which is the Battle of the Bastards. And here's where the Vale forces come in and Sansa's storyline comes in. So, here's what happened in the show. Littlefinger kind of sends Sansa to the Boltons so that he can convince Sweet Robin to go out there and save her from the Boltons. I believe that is correct. Pretend that she was kidnapped and taken by the Boltons. If I remember correctly, that's how that worked out. That's the simplification of it, which makes no fucking sense. So, and also, Sansa agreed to go willingly, which, again, makes no fucking sense. But okay, so let's think about it in a way that's logical. This is what happens in the books. So, in the books, Sansa, she had a best friend called Jean Poole. They were about the same age. And when Sansa gets captured, when all the Stark forces get captured at Winterfell after Ned's death, she was one of the ones that were taken, and Littlefinger takes her and puts her in one of her brothels to begin training as a hooker. So, fast forward in time, once the Boltons take Winterfell, Littlefinger sends Jean Poole to them, and everybody agrees that's going to happen is that Jean Poole, everybody's going to pretend that she's Arya, because nobody's seen Arya in fucking forever. Nobody knows what she looks like. And if anybody, all the people who knew Arya are dead, pretty much. And so they're going to pretend that she's kind of the same age. They're going to pretend that that's Arya. And the reason why Theon Greyjoy is still alive is because Theon Greyjoy grew up with Arya. And so the Boltons told Theon, or Reek at this point, it's like, you are the one who's going to validate this. You are the one who's going to give her away and tell all the Northern Lords that, yeah, this is Arya Stark. This is the girl I grew up with. So that's kind of the way they're playing it. A lot of people know it's fake, but that's kind of the way they're playing it. So the Jean Poole character was taken, and her life, the raping thing and all that stuff, it was actually kind of worse in the books. But, okay, they gave that storyline to Sansa. So how is it that Sansa ends up in Winterfell, and more specifically, how does she end up back with Jon in the Wall? The only explanation for that is that she got stupid and reckless. And how would that have happened? Well, while in the Vale, one of Littlefinger's agents, because he has agents everywhere, brings word that Rickon Stark has been taken by the Umbers, and he will be returned to Winterfell and given to the Boltons, right? Because that's what happens in the show. One of the Umbers goes to the Boltons, and he hands them Rickon and the head of Shaggy Dog. Remember? So one of Littlefinger's agents brings him news of that, and so Sansa could have been snooping, or maybe Littlefinger on purpose made her over here. I doubt it. No, I'm going to say that she was snooping around, and she overheard this or read it in a letter, and that's why she decided, fuck this, I need to go save my brother. And thinks Littlefinger will say yes to helping her, because if you recover Rickon, that means that you have the rightful heir to the north, which means, well, the one who they think is the rightful heir to the north, and that means that there would be another kingdom who's under his control because its leader would be his ally, right? And you have to remember, at this point, Littlefinger is playing everybody. So, if his end goal is that he wants to sit on the Iron Throne, that means that he needs Stannis to kind of die. So, he kind of wants to play it slow and see what happens, see if the Boltons are able to defeat him or not. Because you have to consider one thing. Stannis is at that point the greatest military mind, the greatest general in Westeros at that point. It's the reason why he's so freaking hard to defeat. That's why he's still kicking. However, in this show, they really nerfed him. But let's assume that the weather really fucked up his army and that's the reason he got defeated. But at this point, we're not at that point yet in the story, right? So Sansa begs and pleads Littlefinger to send her to the Karstarks, and so that she can convince them to help them out against the Boltons, to convince them to help them release Rickon, right? Because she thinks that the Karstarks are still loyal to her family because they're technically related, really, really far off. They're still, Starks. They were related at one point, and she's really close with one of the daughters, and so she thinks that they're gonna help. And Littlefinger is like, no, you dumb bitch, that's not gonna happen. But Sansa is adamant, and at this point, Sansa kind of has Littlefinger by the balls, because if she reveals herself to anymore, because she revealed herself as Sansa Stark, and which was a really stupid thing to do, really extremely stupid. But if she decides to reveal, for example, to the Crown that she's Sansa Stark, well, do you remember the Crown thinks that Sansa was responsible for Joffrey's death? So that means that Cersei would immediately know that Littlefinger's a traitor, which would completely fuck up all his plans. So Sansa can really fuck up a lot of Littlefinger's plans if she really wants to. Also, she could tell the Vale Lords that Littlefinger actually killed Lysa and all that stuff. So there's a lot she could do. I mean, she would take herself down with him, but Littlefinger knows that she can do some damage. And Sansa is banking on the fact that Littlefinger won't kill her. She's banking on it. So, let's assume that Sansa, through some coercion and maybe some threats, manages to convince Littlefinger to send a small envoy to the Karstarks at Karhold, see if they can convince them to help them save Rickon from the Umbers. Because at this point, the Umbers still haven't given Rickon to the Boltons, because they're still waiting. They're waiting to see who wins the battle between Stannis and the Boltons. And so whoever wins, that's who they're going to send Rickon to. You don't send in that kind of a gift before you have to, if that makes any sense. Anyway, so Sansa gets sent to the Karstarks because she thinks she needs to go personally because she knows them and they won't believe Littlefinger otherwise because they don't trust Littlefinger. So she goes to the Karstarks, and lo and behold, they betray her and gets taken prisoner to Winterfell. The Karstarks, as soon as they get her, they're like, oh yeah, Stannis is fucking dead. No way he's going to survive this winter. And so they just take him immediately to the Boltons so they can show that they're more loyal and stuff, so they could get a better seat at the table, if that makes any sense. So that's the only explanation that I have as to why Sansa might be there. And then, well, she escapes thanks to Theon, and then they're at the wall. And that's still when she's at the wall, she meets up with Jon, and they actually have a conversation. They don't just talk of, no, I was really mean to you. No, I hated that conversation. Anyway, by this point, Littlefinger had already convinced Sweet Robin to mobilize the army and to head north because they took Sansa, but he wants to do it in secret. And the big issue there is Moat Cailin, because supposedly you can't cross on foot because Moat Cailin is right at the neck of the north, and it's an impenetrable fortress by the south. So he starts sending small contingents of men on ships to cross to the other side and to position themselves to take Moat Cailin whenever they feel it's necessary. And he's using the advantage that the Boltons are so focused on Stannis and the potential wildling army that's coming from the north, from the wall. So that's the only reason why they can manage to do it, because there's only a skeleton crew left in Moat Cailin. Because right now the south is not a big issue for them. Anyway, so Sansa makes it all the way to the wall, and she and Jon talk about what's the plan of attack, and she says we need to ask Sweet Revan for help, but she's unsure whether or not Littlefinger will help after she basically threatened him in order for her to help her, and it blew up in her face completely. So it becomes a big mystery what's going to happen with all the Vale forces, right? So fast forward a little bit. Jon Snow makes his plan. He takes to Dreadfort. The battle of the Bastards happens, and at that time, while they're winning, so Jon Snow wins by his own merits, and as the Bolton forces are retreating back to Winterfell, that's when the Vale forces show up, cut off their retreat, and they're the ones to take Winterfell before but while it's still a skeleton crew, and they don't really have a chance to. The Boltons don't really have a chance to make it back. So Littlefinger is the one who presents Ramsay Bolton to Sansa, to Jon Snow, is kind of like their prize, right? So now they're kind of beholden to him. So you now have a very interesting conflict of power in the north between the Vale forces, who are kind of there for Sansa and Littlefinger, and the Wildling forces, who are there for Jon, and also the rest of the Northern Lords. By the way, Rickon also ends up getting killed in the Battle of the Bastards. As soon as Ramsay, it's a way for Ramsay to provoke Jon into getting him. He doesn't get killed in the BS way that he got killed there. But yeah, he still gets killed in that battle because Ramsay's kind of crazy, and he apparently has a thing for letting hostages go, thinking that they're going to be free and killing them right before they, escape. Anyway, so let me recap the North real quick. Jon Snow resurrected in a way that makes sense. Sansa captured in a way that makes sense. They both meet up at the north. They have the Battle of the Bastards in a way that makes sense. And now you have the Vale forces and the Northern forces kind of in Winterfell trying to see what the next thing is going to be. And that's the whole thing where Jon gets declared king, right? So that really doesn't make any sense. But let's assume that the Northern forces are so hyped up at their resurrected leader that they decide, okay, well, yeah, sure, let's make him king, whatever. Littlefinger, by the way, not a fan of this because he wants to be the leader of the Seven Kingdoms. So he's backing up Sansa, and his argument is that she's actually the legitimate heir. She's actually Ned Stark's legitimate heir. So what happens here is Jon basically says the same thing he says at Season 8. Titles don't fucking matter. The undead are coming. They're coming from the north. We need to go stop them. And you need to keep in mind that this speech is being done with a direwolf standing right next to him, an angry direwolf pacing right next to him. So it adds to the effect. So not only are people starting to think of him as a godly creature, he's also walking around with a fucking gigantic direwolf, which I don't know why they cut him off from the show. But anyway, that's what's happening. And so the Vale Lords are naturally skeptical about what's happening. So Jon says, fine, give me one or two of your most trusted men, and I'll show you. We'll go ranging, we'll find them. Worst case scenario, they just get a little bit cold and then come back, because the wildlings aren't our enemies anymore. So theoretically, there shouldn't be any more threats north of the wall, unless we find the undead. So Littlefinger agrees to that, and says that in the meantime, Sansa should be running Winterfell, to which Jon says, I don't give a fuck. And he grabs the new Vale men and he heads back towards the wall, back to Castle Black, and to arrange the ranging where they're going to show the rest of the Vale Lords that, dude, yeah. So that way, that whole thing where you had to capture a zombie and bring him back? That was stupid. That way they just have to go see the army and they can leave. It's way easier, way safer. Also, then Sansa comes up with a plan in order to keep the rest of the Vale Lords in the north, because the Vale Lords would be like, you know what, fuck this place, I can just go back. As a way to keep them there a little bit longer, Sansa gives some of the Vale Lords the lands of all the northern traders, and that way they have a reason to stay. It's like, oh, I have lands here, I'm going to have power here. In the Vale, I'm just like some nobody lord. Over here, I'll have like a big castle. I'll actually have a legit title. So that's the bribe that she gives them in order to stay there. And also, it kind of steals them from Littlefinger. So Littlefinger doesn't like that, but he rationalizes as okay, fine. This will just help cement Sansa as the leader in the north, and if she's going to be my puppet, she's going to be my Sansa, well then it'll cement my power. But originally he doesn't really like it, but Sansa says, just trust me on this one. That's how she sells it to him. It'll help cement your power here. So that's how that went down. So that's how things end in the north, with Jon going back to the wall with with his forces, the wildlings, and a few Vale men getting ready to go on a big raging north, and Sansa in Winterfell kind of running things with Littlefinger, or setting up the things so that they can survive. They have to divvy up which lords are going to get what. They have to divide the lands. They need to get food because the north is decimated at the point. So Sansa would actually be trying to save the people. Jon is trying to save them through the military way. Sansa's going to be trying to save the north through food, through logistics, through the economy, so stuff like that. So it's an interesting conflict that's happening there because they're both technically heroes of the north in their own way, using the best weapons they have at their disposal. So just to quickly wrap up all the things that are happening in the north, because the last one that's still in the north is technically Bran. So Bran reaches the wall, so he actually ends up at Moat Cailin. And at the end of that season, I'm talking about the end of season 6, that's when he has the vision of the Tower of Joy, where he sees Jon Snow being born and all that stuff. But it's stupid. Well, I'm just gonna delete that. I'm going to eliminate it because it made no fucking sense, and it honestly had absolutely no effect on the story whatsoever. And it's really never been a thing in the show. Nobody really cared who Jon Snow's mom was until that fucking episode. Before that, that's actually a book thing. Book readers care a lot. Show people, I'd never even heard anybody who cared about it until that very moment. So I'm just going to delete that storyline, pretend like it didn't happen because it's not really relevant. We never got any of Ned Stark's visions about it. We never got anything about it at all. So I'm going to delete that. So again, Jon Snow on his way to Castle Black, Bran arriving at Castle Black, and Sansa in Winterfell with Littlefinger negotiating how they're going to handle the logistics of saving the North. And I think that's a good place to stop. This got way more complicated than I thought. This was way longer than I expected. I thought I was going to do a quick little setup, a quick little explanation of everything, but it got way longer. So, okay, I'm going to stop here for today. That's it. That's the setup for the North. Next Monday, I will do the setup for the rest of the 7 Kingdoms. Hopefully, it'll be faster. I did not expect it to be a half an hour just for setting up the North. Wow, apparently there were a lot of things that needed fixing. Tell me, reach out and let me know what you think. As always, you can find me at Dario the Show on Instagram. Reach out, let me know what you thought of this. Is it a good place to start? Is it a good place to kind of fix the things that were wrong with the show and keep it going forward so we could have a decent ending? Or what would you have done differently? What did I mess up? Did I miss something in Jon, Sansa's, Littlefinger's, or Bran's stories? Let me know, and maybe I'll change 1 or 2 things before I continue next Monday. So I'd keep you updated on that. As per usual, on Tuesdays, I will give you a breakdown of the big news stories that came out down over the weekend. There's one particularly interesting where one actor in Game of Thrones says that the ending for his character was confirmed by George R.R. Martin. So that's, you know what? That might deserve its own podcast. You know what? No. I don't think so. No. I'll go through it tomorrow in Super Dario News. So as always, thank you for listening, and I'll see you tomorrow.